I don't talk a lot in my build videos. I think of them more as inspiration than how-to, but some of you guys want to hear my thought process behind the build, and I get that. So I'm gonna talk my way through the build video, go over why I did certain things and what I would do differently next time. This is Build Talk. Probably know, traditional river tables are made using live edge slabs, but those can be a little hard to find for your average builder and they're kind of expensive. So I just made my own. I actually got this idea from Chris over at Four Eyes Furniture. He actually did this on his Instagram stories a while back, and you can watch him do it on his latest build video here on YouTube. I'll put links down in the description. But this is a great way to get a similar look to a live edge without needing an actual live edge, especially if you can't really see the actual edge in the final build, like in this one. So I opted to use duct tape to seal up the MDF mold. This is definitely something I would do differently next time. I went with duct tape because I forgot to pick up some sealing tape. After I had already done the pour, I realized I have a whole box of clear packing tape that probably would have worked great. Oops. The duct tape bunched up with the moisture from the resin and left a lot of bumps and ridges on the back side of the pour. Not a huge problem with a few passes through the planer, but it could have been avoided. One thing I probably should have done a little more research on is how much mica powder to use to color the epoxy. I knew I wanted to put LEDs in the speaker, so I wanted the epoxy to be transparent. It ended up still working in the end, but if I were to do it again, I would use less powder, adding just like little bits to creep up on how much I actually wanted in the end. Also, it takes a lot of stirring to mix the two parts of the epoxy. I think I understirred, which is what made the big cells and swirls in the final pour, which actually turned out pretty cool. It ended up hardening just fine, but the surface of the epoxy wasn't flat. There was some bumps left over. So if you're doing this project, leave the bottom piece of the mold on for the first pass of the planer. You're probably not gonna get like a perfectly flat side to start out with. Cutting the epoxy was super easy. I was actually expecting more of a challenge here with maybe some chipping or cracking, but it cut super smooth. I finished the front baffle with Danish oil and used steel wool to buff out a matte shine after it dried. Turning back time, I would have gone finer on the sanding. I think I stopped at around 220 grit, but for a real nice finish, you'll definitely want to spend some extra time on the sanding and go down to some pretty fine paper. The enclosure was made from 1/2" MDF with my screwed sandwich design. We'll talk a little more about that later in the video. The two woofers were separated inside with a partition, but because of the tweeter being located in the center, the two woofer enclosures aren't equal in volume. I'm actually really surprised I didn't get more comments about this. Now, if the speaker was for critical listening and there was more of a stereo spread between the two channels, maybe you'd be able to hear a difference between the two woofers, but with this particular setup, I can't hear anything that I dislike. So my plan was to offset the woofer's enclosure difference by locating both crossovers and the audio amp on the larger side. But as you can see in the build video, I messed up the back baffle cut, so they had to be on the smaller side. Oops. But even with that, I don't hear much of a difference between the two woofers. So I used my Elder Bluetooth speaker components kit to build the speaker, and that comes with all the components you see in the video. If you're interested in building your own, you can head over to kmakits.com. There's also build plans for this style speaker on that site as well. The kit includes a KAB230 Bluetooth amp with an I/O backplate. This is a super easy setup with most of the connections done with snap connectors. I really like this new I/O backplate as well. Makes the wiring a real clean and easy process, although the wires are super long and can kind of jumble up and become a mess. So cable management is semi-important. The crossover is a really simple design with just a few capacitors and inductors. Again, you can go to kmakits.com and get a kit or plans to find details on the crossover. So I got this cheap LED strip from Amazon, and they're pretty bad. I won't cheap out on the lighting in the future. I really wanted a nice white light to backlight the epoxy, but these didn't really do white very well. Blue ended up being just okay. How I put the enclosure together has been my favorite part of these smallish Bluetooth speaker builds. The front baffle and the back are sandwiched to the enclosure using lag bolts. This really makes the enclosure assembly process accessible to anyone, even with limited tools. A lot of my pre-cut wood kits use this design, which means you really just need something heavy like a few textbooks or a brick to do the glue up. Then everything else just goes together with a screwdriver. So I first talked about doing this build like a year or so ago when I first saw a river table build, and I'm glad I finally got around to it. Despite a few lessons, I think it turned out how I basically wanted it to. And I think this is a great project to take on if, you know, building speakers is something you want to try. It's, you know, original, it's challenging, but not too difficult. It's a good medium. It's a nice project. I'm gonna do another follow-up video to this one where I answer some of your questions you left in the comments. So if you have any more, leave them down below. And this is kind of a new style video for me, so hit that like button if you want to see more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.